Hello, and welcome to the Lotos Club. My name is Jack Sussick. I'm a friend of Bob Billingsley's, and I'm also the president of the Lotos Club. Tonight we're here to reminisce about the Stork Club and the writers who hung out there, as well as remembering one of the Lotos Club's own, Bob's cousin, Charmaine Billingsley, who, by the way, if you may not know, was the little girl in the film you just saw. Of course, it is only, it is only fitting that Charmaine was a member of the Lotos Club. The literary history of the Lotos Club goes back 153 years and counts among its members some of the most successful writers of the 19th, 20th, and 21st centuries, some of which were regulars at the Stork Club. The Stork Club began as a speakeasy in 1929, and after the repeal of Prohibition became one of the most prestigious clubs in the world and stood as a symbol of cafe society. Its storied history has become an integral piece of 20th century New York City history. Among some of the many legendary stories of the club was the time the socialite Evelyn McLean, the owner of the Hope Diamond at the time, lost the diamond under a table while dining at the club. It was found sometime later and returned to her. Ernest Hemingway was able to cash the $100,000 check he received for the film rights to For Whom the Bell Tolls at the Stork Club to settle his bill. Sherman Billingsley had very strict rules at the club. Codes of conduct included impeccable dress, as well as good manners, and he enforced these high standards with an iron fist. Humphrey Bogart was banned from the club for getting into a shouting match with Sherman. Milton Berle was banned because he table hopped too much. And Jackie Gleason was banned because of his off-color language. Charmaine Billingsley was not only a regular at her father's club, but also here at the Lotos Club. Charmaine became a member here in 2004, nearly 20 years ago, and held a number of events here, and her presence and generosity was felt throughout this house. Charmaine, as the daughter of the successful owner of the Stork Club, essentially grew up there. In reviewing Charmaine's application for membership, I read some of her letters of recommendation. Girlfriends who she had gone to school with recount how, after school, they would go to the Stork Club and do their homework. Of course, as evening approached, writers and other celebrities would begin to arrive, and Charmaine, according to her friends, was on a first-name basis with nearly everyone. Bob Billingsley, Charmaine's cousin, is delighted to be here tonight to honor her. She was not only a relation, but a close friend. She was also a co-conspirator in his search to reveal the astounding story of their father's bootlegging business, the subject of a book that Bob is writing. Logan Billingsley, Bob's father, and Sherman Billingsley's older brother, was the leader of the Billingsley brothers, Ora, Fred, Sherman, and Logan, one of the most successful bootlegging gangs in U.S. history. Bob speaks across the country and here in New York about his family's notorious past, and no one at their monthly dinners at J.G. Millen's enjoyed listening to his tales more than Charmaine, and then adding her own spicy stories to Bob's. Sitting with Bob tonight on the panel is Maureen Corrigan, an English professor at Georgetown University, who is a book critic for NPR's Fresh Air, and the winner of many awards for her literary criticism, including the National Book Critics Award. Among her books is So We Read On, How the Great Gatsby Came to Be and Why It Endures. Growing up in New York, Maureen read many stories about the Stork Club. Margaret Talbot has been a staff writer at The New Yorker since 2004, where she writes about subjects from the contemporary Supreme Court to old Hollywood to current indie music. She is the author of The Entertainer, Movies, Magic, and My Father's 20th Century. Her father, Lloyd Talbot, was a stage, motion picture, and movie actor who frequented and was a regular at the Stork Club. Please be sure on your way out to purchase a Stork Club cocktail book, which will be out on a table out here. Now I'd like to introduce Sherman's son, Austin Drill. Charmaine.
We'll see how this goes without a microphone. Good evening. and thank you for being here tonight. My name's Austin, and my brother and I are here tonight to honor our mother, Charmaine Billingsley, and our grandfather, Sherman Billingsley. We're grateful to be here tonight. We're especially grateful for Uncle Bob for conjuring up this night and pulling all the strings that he did to make it happen. We're grateful to Jack and the Lotos Club for hosting us here in this amazing grand room. And we're also appreciative to the chefs at the Lotos Club for tonight for recreating some Stork Club specialty cocktails and hors d'oeuvres for us to enjoy after the show. We're obviously grateful to Maureen and to Margaret for leading us back in time and offering insight to a world that our mother very much loved. She enjoyed many things, but two of her most beloved things, obviously besides myself and my brother, were books and the Stork Club. Our mother was a daughter of New York City and a darling of the fabled Stork Club, New Yorkiest spot, as Walter Winchell once put it. The Stork Club served as a backdrop to her childhood. She grew up in glamour, surrounded by the brightest lights and the biggest stars. She spoke about the Stork as others speak about their childhood home, with affection and dreaminess. It truly was a storybook childhood. And our mother loved a good story. She truly did. She loved listening and reading and writing and writers. She would have reveled in being here tonight with us, but we know in many ways she is here with us tonight. She once wrote about the Stork Club, and I was there looking and learning and growing. I wouldn't have changed a thing. So let's look and learn and grow together tonight as we all slip back into the past. Thank you for being here tonight.
It's overwhelming for me to be here tonight. I feel as though we really are kind of in a small way recreating the atmosphere of the Stork Club. And also, as Margaret and I were talking right before we stepped on board, the amazing intersection of people who patronize the Stork Club: writers, artists, performers, politicians, not to mention maybe some shadier characters once in a while. Never. And I had the privilege of meeting Charmaine a few times, and she was so warm and gracious and humored me when I asked her what it was like to meet Cary Grant, which a question that she must have been asked many a time. I want to start by asking you, Bob, why are we here for the Stork Club? What was it that was so unique about the Stork Club? We're not here to honor 21. We're not here to honor the Copacabana. We're not here to talk about cafe society in a general way. We're here to talk about the Stork Club. What made it so special?
Let me answer that for once by not talking. So why don't we show some pictures, okay? All right. That's one reason why people went there. That's another reason why people went there. That's another reason why people went there, and some of those people were thrown out. That's another picture. That's on JFK's 39th birthday. That's the reason why. You can see his brothers in formal, and he doesn't know about it. That's in May of 1959. And I have this here because Maureen and I are buddies. And her dad did not go to the Stork Club. But she always told me he looked like Dana Andrews. So if you want to know what Maureen's dad looked like, Here is a picture of him, and also, too, if we get going with Jennifer Egan, and many of you read her book, Manhattan Beach. She evokes the time of the Brooklyn Navy Yard and servicemen and all the rest, and we could sort of thrash that around, the Stork Club side of it and all the rest. So that's the reason. I think that what differentiated it was that El Morocco was for European sophisticates, John Perona, and also the photography there, Zerbe, and of course, that kind of scene. And also, you've seen it, the blue zebra skins that you see on all the photographs. That was its niche. I think that you hear also about the Colony Club on not the Colony Club, being correct, the Colony Restaurant on 61st Street, which was a much narrower following. But I think, and Pete Hamill said what you said about this cross-section of people meeting there. It was not only the sophisticates, it really brought together what they called at that time the Park Avenue set, okay? Two people on Broadway, and we'll maybe go into Sherman's background and you could see what a Rolodex he had from Broadway. People from the movies, politicians, Frank Costello. It was so many people there, the buzz around it. And I think it was really that it drew from more than just one crowd. It drew from every crowd of those kinds of people.
Well, already we can see it's impossible to talk about the Stork Club without talking about Sherman. So tell us in 3 minutes or less, because I know you have a book about this.
That's how well we know each other. She can give me grief. You know?
How do you get to be Sherman Billingsley of the Stork Club when you start off where he started off?
Okay, I just happen to have written something. After all, it's about writers at the Stork Club. I am a writer about the Stork Club. And do you have, can we get the slide here? Anyway, this is not glamour. This is my uncle growing up. And here's Sherman in the middle. He's the youngest child, and he's between his father and his oldest brother, Logan. He's the one with the bow tie. And they're in front of the family farmhouse near Anadarko, Oklahoma in 1904. Later that year, Logan, my father, would shoot and kill his father-in-law, the fallout of which would lead him to turn to bootlegging when Oklahoma went dry 3 years later. Sherman, along with brothers Ora and Fred, eventually joined Logan, and they became one of the most successful criminal operations in America at that time. By the age of 14, my uncle is already honing his sales skills, making money, and charming his thirsty customers, from outlaws to businessmen to prostitutes, in a so-called drugstore that his brothers owned in Oklahoma City. Now, over the next decade, more states went dry, and Sherman and his brothers kind of took to the road and crisscrossed America from Oregon to West Virginia to take advantage of the new markets that were emerging for the sale of illegal alcohol. And law enforcement officers and headlines followed in their wake. Show me the next slide. Now, this is what gets him to New York. In 1918 in Detroit, by this time, Logan and Sherman and their brothers had set up what was generally acknowledged as the most successful whiskey smugglers in the country. They were selling liquor to upscale customers, like hotels and restaurants and wealthy industrialists. And when Sherman is arrested and sent to prison, which happened, when Logan was arrested and sent to prison, which was often, it is 22-year-old Sherman, not either of his older brothers, who takes over the family business. But Logan comes back, and in 1919, he sets up a liquor syndicate with a mafia family in Detroit. And then he proceeds to scoop up about $500,000 of their liquor stock, and he absconds to Cuba to sell it. Sherman in Detroit gets wind of the Sicilians' intentions to find and kill my father. So Sherman gets on a train to New York to warn his brother. Sherman intended to stay in New York for 10 days. He winds up staying for 44 years. I believe this made my uncle into the man we're going to talk about tonight. Thank you.
After tonight is over, you go back home and you start writing the book.
Yes, Professor Corrigan.
Because you really have an amazing American story to tell.
Thank you.
Connected with the Stork Club. Margaret Talbot has written a book about her father who has a similar kind of American story, sans the bootlegging and the murdering. But it's a story, it's a story about transformation, and your father, of course, intersects with the Stork Club, and you two intersect with each other, so I'm going to ask you to tell some of that story.
Sure, yeah. My father did not have quite as thoroughly a criminal background, but he did come from a sort of raffish Midwestern milieu. He started off as a magician's assistant and working for a hypnotist, having rocks broken on his chest as a shill in the audience, and then was in traveling theater in the Midwest and ended up in Hollywood in the early 30s. But this is him, Lyle Talbot is his name. But he was in New York in 1940, 1941, doing a play called Separate Rooms on Broadway with an actress named Glenda Farrell. The play was badly reviewed, especially by The New Yorker, my magazine, which was excoriating about it. But you know, it was a lighthearted romp. It was a kind of a sex farce, and it was very popular. It did very well, and it ran for about a year and a half. And so during that time, my dad, who was about 40 then and about to marry his third wife, was really enjoying being kind of a man about town in New York, and the Stork Club was one of the places, of course, he loved to see and be seen. And I think, you know, it was partly because, you know, he was sort of a nightclub Romeo and that kind of thing, and would be written about by Walter Winchell and Dorothy Kilgallen and others, and, you know, enjoyed that, that exposure. But I think also because of this point we were making about the club sort of bringing in not only actors and performers, but also writers, and he loved being kind of adjacent to the sort of Algonquin Club smart set. And I'll just tell one quick story about that. He lived in the Royalton apartment. He was acting at the Plymouth, going to the Stork late at night, and he lived at the Royalton, which was a hotel, and George Jean Nathan, who was the sort of dean of theater critics, lived there as well, and wrote a terrible review of the play, Separate Rooms, and he lived a couple of floors down, and so my father, you know, probably drunk when he did this, but kind of summoned up you know, all his fury and scrawled across the clipping of the review, "You stink too," and you know, a very clever riposte. And George Jean Nathan was, of course, he was the basis for Addison DeWitt and All About Eve. He was this, you know, brittle, sophisticated, and everything. So I don't think this would have really gotten him, you know, where he lived. But anyway, my dad stuck it under the door, and then because he was my dad and he was actually a fundamentally very nice person, he thought better of it in the morning in the sober light of day and thought, I'm going to go get that back. And so he went downstairs, and luckily he was a person who always befriended, you know, waiters, taxi drivers, cleaning staff. So he was friends with the maid, and so he said, "Could you go into, you know, Nathan's room and extract this, you know, incriminating clip?" Which she kindly did to help him out. But anyway, that was a world. I'm sure that Nathan went to the Stork Club. All these Algonquin Club types did as well, and so I'm sure he crossed paths with them, and you know, and loved that.
I know you don't really want to do this, but I love the passage in your book, The Entertainer, where you're talking about Lyle in New York and what it would have been like almost to be walking around New York and what the city was offering, especially at night with the nightclubs. Would you read a little
Sure. Well, since Bob also picked out this passage, I'm pleased to read it. In the evenings, he made the short walk to the theater, sometimes stopping for a frankfurter or a warm jacket potato from one of the vendors. He loved the blue velvet of dusk as it settled over the city, but did nothing to muffle it. He loved the candy apple red of the neon signs, the sunflower yellow of the cabs, and the unexpected privacy of walking under a black umbrella in the rain on a busy New York street. He loved the way the porter greeted him every night at the stage door with an ironic bow, and how Glenda, looking chic and radiant, gave him her soft, powdered cheek for a kiss. And he loved knowing that when the show was over that night, the night would really only just have begun. Lyle was certainly making himself at home in the stylish nightclubs and eateries of New York. Now close to 40, he had put on weight, but he dressed as always with great care, and the New York papers often ran squibs about his look for the night. Style flash. Lyle Talbot at Bill Bertolotti's in a gray sharkskin suit, striped with green and red, blue shirt with white collar, and blue and silver figured tie. He was seen at La Conga, the Rainbow Room, the Stork Club, El Morocco, and Ben Martin's Riviera, the nightclub perched high above the Hudson River, just across the George Washington Bridge in Fort Lee, New Jersey.
It's beautiful. We all want to go out into the evening and find these places again, these beautiful places in New York. Lyle is there, as we saw, a lot of movie stars, if they're especially visiting New York, they come to the Stork Club. And then we have the writers. We've got Damon Runyon, Dorothy Kilgallen, who Bob says your father squired around. I'm not quite sure what that means, but Dorothy Kilgallen, the gossip columnist. It's one of your verbs. Walter Winchell, Ernest Hemingway, Scott Fitzgerald, Dashiell Hammett, Lillian Hellman. Who am I leaving out? There's so many writers. And I think it's kind of interesting that Sherman created a space where writers not only felt comfortable coming to, but also they were inspired by. I think you have some slides of some of these writers too.
Oh, okay. Just a couple. Okay, so there it is. I mean, and the marvel at this, you've heard about Sherman's background. He basically had a second-grade education, and he's people like this are coming there. And this one I love. I mean, Hemingway and O'Hara doesn't get better than that. Why don't we go on from there? Damon Runyon, who I love, and I want to deal with more because he actually started to write a book on Sherman. Walter Winchell. Do I get into Winchell now or later? What do you want to do?
Let's get into Winchell now.
Okay, let's. Baby boomers like me came in at the sort of the end of Winchell's power. Walter Winchell, in America in the 1930s and 40s, when there are 130 million people, every week, 50 million people are either hearing his radio show or reading his column. He is arguably, at that time, the second most powerful man in America, and the most powerful man in America is his friend. Neil Gabler, in his wonderful book about Winchell, says that Winchell changed journalism into entertainment. So if you had Winchell's imprimatur, well, someone even said, I guess it was Gabler, said, before Walter Winchell, you were famous because you did something great. After Walter Winchell, you were famous because he wrote about you. And I think that's very true. And you want to come back to the founding of Stork Club, or
Sure.
Okay, we'll do that later. Okay, so anyway, that's the reason why Winchell's in the center, and that's the reason why he had his own table at the Stork Club. Why don't we move forward? I thought this was interesting. Bennett Cerf is a writer. We know him as a publisher. My generation knows him because he's on What's My Line, right? But it's interesting. He wrote a joke book, and I think he said something that's very true, and it gets you, why did writers hang out there, okay? This was a time, anybody don't have gray hair in the audience? This is a time before the internet, before television, and this is how you got together and got information. And you went there to get the raw materials of writing, And Bennett Cerf graciously says, Sherman, half the stories that I have in my humor book, which did very well, by the way, I wouldn't have had unless I hung out at the Stork Club. Why don't we go ahead? Next, where? Okay, J.D. Salinger, I don't associate with the Stork Club. I associate it when I first read the book in the 50s. I went, holy God, that guy gets me. And then my girlfriend said, her boyfriend said, you know, you remind me of Holden Caulfield, and I wanted to shoot myself. But anyway, Salinger, the Salinger, not the recluse. And as my father would say, the horse's ass later on in his life. But Salinger, the young New Yorker, is living on Park Avenue. It's before he's in World War II and he sees the death camps, and I think it affects him for life. He's hanging out at the Stork Club. He's a rich person, and he's in love with Una O'Neill. Eugene O'Neill's father. He did not hang out at the Stork Club. I guess Sherman wouldn't want him there because he would cast a pall over everybody else. But anyway, so he falls in love with Una. Una gets elected debutante of the year, which must have really fried her father. She goes out to Hollywood. She meets Charlie Chaplin and go from there. But Salinger pines for her, you know, in this whole writing of the period. And then he comes back afterwards to the articles in the New Yorker, you know, and he's off and running to whatever he's off and running to. Let's go with another one. We got another one? Dorothy Kilgallen. Why don't you want to talk about Kilgallen?
Yeah, well, Kilgallen is, I mean, I guess what we would say now is a gossip columnist, but she's covering Broadway. She's letting the readers know about what's going on in New York. And for me, she ties into this larger point about the Stork Club, about the New Yorker. You know, they're both phenomena that come of age in the 20s. The New Yorker's 1925, the Stork Club 1929. There's something going on about what we might call the culture of spectacle. Mm-hmm. It's emerging. There are these glossy magazines, often illustrated. Of course, film is happening. Mm-hmm. And you get this sense of something Margaret wrote about really beautifully in the beginning of your book, The Entertainer, about people sort of having a different sense of themselves and judging themselves almost differently, that it's maybe not so much about character, but how you presented yourself. Like, even in that description of your father getting ready for the night, you know, or you saying that Sherman, you know, of course always dressed beautifully and expected his clientele to be dressed for this event. There's something about the Stork Club, the New Yorker. I guess I want to get to representing New York to the rest of the country, and something about New York. The spectacle of the Stork Club somehow translates out there. Okay.
You're sounding academic, so
I know.
Why don't you pick up on this, and I'll conjure with what I can say.
Well, it is true that, you know, people heard about the Stork Club because, and maybe you can talk about this later, Bob, there was a TV show that showed the Stork Club to the rest of the country. And there was this sense, like, even with the New Yorker, you know, Harold Ross, who was the first editor of the New Yorker, famously said it wasn't going to be a magazine edited for the old lady from Dubuque. In that sense, what he meant was he wanted to be a sophisticated magazine for, you know, the smart set. But he also did want it to represent New York and bring news of New York and New York culture and New York life and New York zing and magnetism to the rest of the country. And people, in fact, did read it in the rest of the country and then yearned to come and be here and go to places like the Stork Club or, you know, or you know, the Automat, you know, anything they read about or heard about in the magazine, you know, be part of the Cafe Society and the life of the theater, the life of the, you know, the writing life if they were aspiring to be writers. So I think these were places that created a sense of excitement about New York as a cultural capital that it didn't have so much before the 1920s, actually. So I think you're onto something.
Well, I think the 20s, which we love, okay, we talk about, and Maureen teaches a seminal course at Georgetown, New York writers, you know, and we both have talk about our time capsules of going back to the so let me put some perspective in this. 1920, Europe is exhausted. Okay. 1920, the banking center of the world moves to New York. 1923, New York's the biggest city in the world. Okay. In the 20s, the economy is growing on average more than 5%. But really, it just gives a running start, you know, to the whole century. It is first of all radios. You know, radios, which is so big a part of this Winchell whatever, is 1 out of every 100 people in 1920 have a radio. 1929, 1 out of every 3. Okay, and the pace of things with the auto, you know, we've talked about this too, that you have billboards and you have to have snappy messages. You know, you don't have the time to read it as you're going because you kill somebody in your car. So the whole pace of the language picks up. What do you have? Dancing, Charleston. And I think it's the momentum of that, because Sherman comes here in the 20s. And what could be for these 3 brothers, I mean, if you wanted to be ground zero in the 20s with that kind of speed and action, you wanted to be here. And the other thing later on, as it evolves into the 30s, you know, in 1931, you know, 25% of the people don't have jobs. The GDP is half. Auto sales are off by 2/3. That at that time, you would think that people who don't have money would be envious. They're not. I mean, look at the movies that are going on in the 30s. I mean, Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire, you know, Edward Everett Horton, and, you know, that kind of thing. That's what people want. And I think in the 30s, it's, you know, like Sullivan's Travels. I don't know if you all have ever seen that movie, where he wants to make, you know, the next great serious movie, and he goes to prison and he sees everybody laughing at Mickey Mouse, and this is Joel McRae. So I think it's that, and that Sherman is in the 30s. He is what people want to see, how they want to live. New York's the center of the world. He is a relief from them in the drudgery of their life. And we could talk about the 40s later on, because that's really the sweet spot of nightclubs.
Well, I want to skip to the TV show, because you have that wonderful letter from a fan,
Which I gotta find.
which you've got to find. But
Find me the letter.
you could actually paraphrase it at this point.
Yeah, this is in the 50s. The 50s, things are better off. So Sherman had a show from 50 to 55, okay? And it was, at times, they weren't going to renew it. So this wonderful, I have it here someplace. It's after my bill from the Lotos Club. But paraphrasing it, she said, she writes just leaves her initials, and she puts it in a postcard marked Sherman Billingsley, the Stork Club, New York. Yeah.
And it got there.
Right. And she says, I love watching you and Shermaine. And I'll come back to Shermaine dynamics. It means so much to us. We are poor people, and it is our one happy time every week. Every week. And this is the 1950s. But the TV show propels it. But it's interesting because Shermaine is, she's like Johnny Carson. She really is great, and they keep on giving her bigger and bigger parts in the shows. My uncle, this isn't his thing, and he's awkward, and he trips over cameras. And the opening scene, pouring the champagne, sometimes it gets spilled, and you can't do it over. So I mean, he's making $100,000 a year from it. They have their own studio there, and the introductions of Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so. He projects it out, to try and get himself in the 50s. But in the 50s, particularly later 50s, it's not the age of the Stork Club. We can talk about why it goes out of business. But in the 50s, it's still the New York is place, which obviously is Winchell's quote.
I think it's so affecting that it doesn't matter that your uncle wasn't great on TV.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
You
know why she's my friend?
No, because it's the club. I mean, that's the spectacle. That's the star there. Shermaine is also a star, but the club is the star, and it represents something to people out there about the city that I think we still like to think New York has some of that, whatever that magic dust was.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, your dad's there in 3940, okay? it really is. And then Sherman, he's such a genius of a marker. We could have a week talking about that. But he makes it into America's club. Yeah. And like enlisted men, like your dad, and people, if you had a uniform, you didn't pay for drinks. And the uniformed people then, it's a great meeting place because Elliot Roosevelt, FDR's son, is there in his uniform, and his brother, FDR Jr. And just servicemen come in. And what happens is that again, these servicemen who are not wealthy people, the PXs in Africa have a Stork Club, okay? They name a B-17 after the Stork Club. And it's the genius, and my uncle saying, I'm America's club, because internationally, it's still sort of Elmo, you know. But this is it, and he propels it further. And of course, we being New Yorkers, you know, we're the center of the world when we talk about it.
I think we also have to say that your dad's third wife has the connection to the Stork. They met at the Stork Club.
They did, yeah. It's very romantic, kind of. She had won a contest in North Carolina, and sort of a beauty talent contest. She was a young woman, and her name is Abigail Adams. And she, the prize for the contest was to be some sort of decorative asset at the Stork Club for a week or two to walk around. I don't know what she did exactly, but to walk around. And my dad met her there, and they were married. The marriage lasted 3 months.
A marriage made in heaven.
Marriage made in the Stork Club.
There you go.
Right. Yeah. Well, I want to come down from sounding academic, and I want to ask this question, which is, I know who my three are, but if you had to take the time machine back and recreate a little table at the Stork Club with maybe 2 or 3 other people, who would they be?
You first.
Me first? Okay, well, these two know who I'm going to say. Lillian Hellman tells a story in one of her memoirs, so you have to take it with a grain of salt, because most of us know Lillian Hellman's attachment to truth was a little shaky in those memoirs. But she talks about a night at the Stork Club where Dashiell Hammett is sitting with Ernest Hemingway. And Hemingway's probably had a few, and he's being belligerent. And he's challenging Hammett to a spoon bending contest. And Hammett beats him. He bends the spoon and really angers Hemingway. And then Hammett goes in for the jugular. He says, "Too bad Fitzgerald doesn't know what a great writer he is. He's the greatest." And at that, Hellman says, Hemingway gets up and stalks out of the Stork Club. So I would have liked to have been at that table.
Well, I think I would pick the journalist Haywood Broun, who was an Algonquin Club guy, friends with Dorothy Parker and Robert Benchley and all these people. He ran unsuccessfully on a Socialist Party ticket for some higher office. He was a sports writer. He wrote about baseball. That would be tricky for me. The conversation would not last that long. But he was apparently a very amusing guy. He was very disheveled, but he got into the Stork Club anyway. They would describe him as looking like an unmade bed. But he was married to a woman named Ruth Hale, who was a journalist and feminist who was one of the founders of the Lucy Stone League, which was an organization that promoted the idea that women could keep their own names when they got married. This was in the 20s. It was very controversial. And on your passport and so on. And so they were an interesting couple, and they frequented the Stork Club in the early years, so I would like to have dined with them. And I'm just going to throw in Joan Blondell, who's an actress I love from the pre-code era, who's, just sassy and brassy and full of life, and as an actress, and I think she was as a person too, so.
Good table.
Now, when we were preparing for this, you never responded, because he said, "What 3 people?" And I said, Marilyn Monroe, Marilyn Monroe, Marilyn Monroe. And oh, my daughter's here. Sorry, sweetie. I didn't mean to say that. Anyway, let me pick up on Brune, and then I'll give you the people at the table. So in 1929, Sherman actually got the Stork Club because of a lousy real estate deal, which is something I know about personally. But anyway, so what happens is that he's got stuck with this speakeasy, and he has no customers. And Brune is walking down 58th Street, because the Stork Club's on 58th Street at the time, on 132, 152, West 58th Street behind the New York AC. And he's walking down the street, and he's had a few drinks, and the Stork Club is so empty. Actually, Brune that day was looking to go to the funeral of a friend. And the Stork Club is so empty, he somehow mistakes it for a funeral parlor. and he walks in, okay? And he keeps on walking in, and he gets to the back room where they're serving booze, expecting a corpse, and he finds a bar. So he seizes the opportunity, and so does Sherman, and actually he brings in a lot of his crowd, and that's the reason why it goes forth. So he's really, and of course, I mean, Winchell is the big guy. I mean, no Winchell, no Stork Club, but Brune does. And I think that as to the people involved, in a non-jocular moment, I've always loved Barbara Stanwyck, Ruby Stevens from New York. She also, she knew a woman named Texas Guinan, who, if you haven't read about, she should. She's the queen of the New York nightclubs, Mary Louise Cecile Guinan, who dies in 1933. And Barbara Stanwyck, I love the way she acts. Also, too, your father says that on the set, she's nice to everybody. She never forgot she was Ruby Stevens, so that would be one. The second one, I mean, if he'd keep his mouth shut, and he couldn't, or he didn't slug me, would be Hemingway. Because I go back and read A Movable Feast, and geez, I mean, it is what it is. I think third is difficult because he's a quiet man. He doesn't drink. He's very secretive. So if Sherman said, hey, Damon, I got my favorite nephew here. He's writing a book. Talk to him. Talk to him about what you know. And because I guess it's because I'm in real estate. I love scoundrels, okay? And to think that, Mississippi Martin is Texas Guinan. Dave the Duke is Frank Costello. The Brain is Arnold Rothstein. And my uncle knew all these people. So to him, Guys and Dolls is not, Stubby K saying, we're sinking the boat or whatever he sings. I mean, they're like his landsmen, And to get in on those conversations, if this man, who was a very secretive man, would open up to me, that would be fascinating. Because he's sitting with Arnold Rothstein the afternoon before he gets popped, And he knows all these people, the underside of Broadway, and what's going to happen to me. I mean, geez. Yeah. I mean, that to me, that would be a movable feast. The last one, I think, is Ed Murrow. He would be fascinating with his background, and he used to go there. And I might say, too, what Sherman would do with all these celebrities. For instance, he would send them a case of champagne, at the end of the year. He would give them, jewelry, perfume, and you didn't pay. And if you're a beautiful woman, like, Lyle's wife was, you didn't pay for your drinks, because he realized that was the decoration. He would take ads in the Ivy League newspapers, He would bribe people delivering telegrams to get the addresses of the stars so he could send them these gifts. Then that's what kind of with a second-degree education, he's a great marketer. But anyway, one Harold Ross, and then we could get back to New Yorker. So Harold Ross, St. Clair, help me.
St. Clair McKelway.
McKelway. St. Clair McKelway writes a series of devastating articles. He has the BALLS to write a series of damaging articles about Winchell in 1940, okay? Winchell goes ballistic. Although Sherman likes Ross and likes him a lot, this is in the 40s, he bars him from the Stork Club. But that isn't enough for Winchell. Winchell writes this damning letter to the New Yorker, accusing Ross of all of these terrible things, and in it is, he says, "You don't even wear underwear." That's not the end of the story. The end of the story is that Ross gets an envelope and he sends Winchell his underwear. So anyway, I don't know. You don't associate that with the New Yorker, but anyway, it showed Ross as, again, a man who comes from Colorado. He's outside of New York. Hemingway, Runyon, Sherman. E.B. White said what? About people,
There are
the kinds of New
three
Yorkers.
types of New Yorkers: the people who were born here, the people who commute back and forth, and the people who come from somewhere else. And think of New York as their green light.
Right. And it was for Sherman. It was for, some of these writers.
Yeah.
So.
So we thought it might be fun to ask you to participate in a matching game as a way to maybe also get you into the conversation and questions that you might have. There's so many writers who've written about the Stork Club, and as Bob mentioned, even Jennifer Egan in Manhattan Beach, she's writing about the Stork Club in that historical novel. We thought we would put some quotes up, and we'd put a list of writers up, and have you play a matching game with us, and the winner gets
An extra drink. On you.
yeah. So do we have?
Sure.
Yeah. Here we go.
Okay, you want to read, or what do you want to do?
I think we each need to read. So
Okay.
can you read?
Okay.
You want to take Benchley?
Well, this isn't.
Oh,
this,
so
this-
it's not necessary.
No, this is, okay.
Right.
Okay. The rules of the game. Okay. This, random authors, okay, this is random, this is not. You have to pick from our authors, these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 authors, okay, who said these 3 quotes, okay? So, anyway, you want me to do the first?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, no, you're gonna get a third. Good observation. No wonder you're president of the club, Jack. They're gonna get a third quote. All right. So, boy, I'll bet you could get quite a meal at the Stork tonight. Hunger is a marvelous sauce, and danger of death is quite strong wine. You keep the Stork, though, as a symbol of how well you like to eat. Okay?
Well, we need to ask them to guess. Right?
Guess.
Guess.
If you don't know it, we got problems. But anyway.
They can see the list of writers.
Yes, do you see the list of writers?
Who do you think that sounds like?
Who does that sound like? Who said it?
Who said that?
There you go.
Hemingway.
Yes.
Yeah, Hemingway.
No wonder you're her accompanist. That's good. We like this. Okay.
And he was when he was volunteering for the Spanish Civil War. He
Yeah.
wrote that from Spain or
Yeah.
about Spain.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
We'll just add it.
Yeah.
So the next quote. And the whole 3 of them kept looking around the goddamn room like as if they expected a goddamn flock of movie stars to come in any minute. They probably thought movie stars always hung out in the Lavender Room when they came to New York instead of the Stork Club or El Morocco and all. Anyway, it took me half an hour to find out where they all worked in Seattle.
Okay, there we go. There you go.
Yeah, so far.
Okay, so we got one more? Okay. You.
Sadly, I can't really read them.
And then, this is too subtle for me. You got to do it. You got to do
Okay,
over.
all right, this is a
Okay.
big one.
Yeah.
Nebraska was dry. The dryness thereof Sherman made it his business to alleviate. He began riding the bleak western roads through the dark of night with loads of liquor for relief of thirst in such towns as Omaha. It was what they called rum running. He was young. It was the high excitement that youth craves. I would not be surprised if today, as he sits in the lush elegance of his Stork Club, absently nodding to celebrities, There are times when he sees beyond the lights and gay crowds, the lone reaches of some black and muddy road in the back country of Nebraska, and hears above the oompa of some rumba number the steady hum of his motor as he drives furiously through the night.
Yes, very good. Damon Runyon, and I think, too, Maureen's going to close out this segment, but what I was saying to you before about where Sherman comes from, Runyon got it, I think, to me, anyway, as his nephew.
Well, you're saying I'm closing out this segment. I'm just going to say, I love the idea of the Stork Club. I love, the vision of Lyle Talbot coming in there. I love all of these people who you named and whose pictures we saw, because pretty much they all started somewhere else.
Yes.
And they're a little bit performing this idea or ideal vision of what they have of themselves. It's exciting.
Well, I would like to say something, and you don't know I'm going to say this, you two, but I have read both of their books twice, okay? And I'm not a big reader, okay? But Margaret's book, I was reading The Entertainer, and that's Sherman, that's Logan, it's like, it was a marvelous journey through the 20th century. And the other thing too, one of her brothers was a child actor. And he was on leave at the Beaver with my sister-in-law, Barbara Billingsley, who played June Cleaver. So she is an honorary Billingsley, as far as I'm concerned. But if you are my friends, and a lot of you are, you have to read Margaret's book. You just have to, and I'm going to test you on it. And the other thing too is that Maureen and I became friends because Scott Fitzgerald's our favorite writer. And she wrote a book about Scott Fitzgerald that I've read twice. And when I talk about Scott Fitzgerald to a lot of you, the reason why I sound smart is because of her, okay? So I would, and Charmaine loved the book too. And I would recommend highly that you read it. If you don't love Fitzgerald, then I'm not going to give you a drink. But if you do love Fitzgerald, you have to read my friend's book over here. So anyway, that closes out. We have two surprises. And the first one, I mean, Sherman always had surprises and gimmicks at the Stork Club. The first one, I'd like to bring up Austin, where are you? And Michelle. Okay. Austin calls me Uncle Bob, but he's really, like, we haven't figured it out, some kind of cousin. And Michelle is my niece, but she's really his wife. And Cliff is Austin's brother. And we have a surprise for you and Susanna, who's going to be my second surprise, and for Jack. So why don't you all take it away? Okay.
So as Uncle Bob, I just always thought I use my uncle, how wouldn't he be not my cousin, that was Sherman. It was mentioned, Sherman always loved to give gifts to his friends, to his family, to his loyal patrons. And whether it be the cases of champagne or cologne or perfume, cosmetics. So we thought tonight, in true Sherman fashion, if we could give a couple of gifts to these wonderful, pertinent people tonight that made this night so successful, to Maureen and to Margaret and to Susanna and to Jack. Thank you. So we wanted to give you an Albert Dorn illustration of the original Stork Club menu. And maybe, Michelle, you could read a couple of names. We have a little on the back.
So in the sweep of the room, the painting captures Sherman Billingsley with loyal patrons and famous regulars of that era. Can you hear me? Sorry. I'll give it another go. In the sweep of the room, the painting captures Sherman Billingsley with loyal patrons and famous regulars of that era, including Elizabeth Taylor, Lana Turner, Arthur Godfrey, Tallulah Bankhead, Dorothy Kilgallen, Joan Crawford, Walter Winchell, and more. Sherman used Dorn's illustration as cover art on many of the Stork Club menus. And these are signed by Charmaine.
So our second surprise is not my friend David Huntington over here. Stand up. Stand up. You got to stand up. It's his wife, Susanna Phillips. And if you know anything about opera, you know she's has one of the greatest voices, well, in the world. She also, and it's not just me saying it, it's Vince Giordano, she can really land the American songbook. So I'm going to ask her to sing a song. That song has significance because it is the opening and closing theme of the Stork Club TV show. It's also a gorgeous song by Vernon Duke, and she's here with her accompanist, Bradley, yeah, and who is also a star at the Met. Accompanist, so like Dooley Wilson or someone. He's from the Met too, and I'd love to have her sing it for us. Susanna is a friend, and well, I don't know. I'll accept now the compliments you're going to give me later after you hear her sing. So where's the bar? Right that way. Thank you for coming.